Hi, kids. Hi, kids. So we're going to finish up the introduction so you can understand the quiz we're going to have on Shakespeare for the introduction. So we left off, if you recall, talking about Queen Elizabeth. The status of actors improved as Queen Elizabeth began enjoying Shakespeare's exceptional plays. More members of royalty began to appreciate the theater, and Shakespeare and Company were making bank. So if you ever have to have the opportunity to sit with a governor or a president or something, you might want to talk about things that they're interested in. And if the Queen says she just saw a wonderful play by William Shakespeare, it would behoove you if you could say, yeah, I saw the same play. So anytime the Queen saw a play, of course, everybody rushed out to see what the Queen was seeing. People still do this with fashions for famous people, things like that. So it made a big deal that he was friends. Well, he wasn't friends, don't get me wrong, but that the Queen knew who he was and appreciated his work. Okay, get this over here. Yeah, okay. Still, life in the theater was never easy. Not everyone could afford the full ticket price. Poor people called groundlings were allowed to stand and watch the play from the ground. Some were called penny stinkers because they paid only a penny and, well, ew, they stunk. Yeah, they did. So everybody got to enjoy the theater. You can see why a queen would not be seen in there. But it was opportunity for poor people to get in, just pay a penny, but they had to stand. And then they had the nicer boxes and things like that. So they were learning how to run the theater. Then there were rival theaters who would steal ideas and even plays. All this was legal. There was no copyright laws. It remained a rough business and certainly no place for a proper woman. No women were allowed in the theater troops or on the stage. Adding to their troubles were outbreaks of the Black Death, which could shut down the theater for weeks. It was a horrible disease, often spread by the fleas on rats. Ew. Yeah, well, we're living through a pandemic right now. You need to know for the quiz that it killed, the Black Death killed about 25% of the population. And so it was very dangerous. And with a business like theaters, and we've seen this right now, they had to shut down. Okay, so Shakespeare had a couple experiences with that. Also, women were not allowed to play in plays. Who played their parts? Young boys. Wow, they allowed that? Well, it was a little tricky. See, the thing is, before Shakespeare and before theaters, the way people traveled, the theater companies would get in a carriage and they would go from town to town and camp along the way. Well, you can imagine these sleeping bags right next to each other, you know, and the girls and the guys and all the perhaps mischief that could take place. So what that would be like today maybe is a young girl saying, I'm going to go on tour with a rock band, the Screaming Cheetah Wheelies. I'm going to be on a tour bus with 7 guys and I'm sure everything will be fine. Your parents may not approve of that, okay? So no, the women were not allowed on stage. And young boys played the parts of the girls. So like Juliet and Romeo would be kissing? No, they wouldn't have allowed that either. Romeo would have kissed her hand, okay, and Juliet would have been a young boy learning how to be an actor, okay? Remember, they were in front of 1,000 people. If you've ever performed in front of 1,000 people, it can be a little disconcerting. And so these young 11, 12, 13-year-old boys were trying to learn how to be actors and the actresses, and they would play the parts and build up their craft. And then eventually, Juliet, a boy who plays Juliet might get a deep voice and start growing a beard. He might become Romeo because he knows all the parts. Oh, I see. So it does seem a bit strange by today's standards, but that's what they did. And it is on the quiz that women were not allowed on the stage and that young boys played the parts of women. Shakespeare retired in 1613 at the age of 49, died on his birthday, 1616. So do you still eat the cake? I do want you to know that he retired. I'm going to go through a couple of these questions to make sure everybody's covered for everything that we've talked about. That's going to be on the quiz. Let's see here. I want you to know penny stinkers, okay? And they were the poor people. Even though the Globe Theater what happens is the Globe Theater burns down, he just calls it quits. He figures rather than rebuild the whole thing, he just retired at that point. He was, I think, 49, and back then that was considered, you were already a lot older than the average, and he lived another 3 years. So it was not odd to be retiring at 49. In fact, he considered himself quite lucky that he could, and he had quite a bit of money from his theater. I want you to know his first play was Henry VI. Actors were considered very much, not much more than bums back before Shakespeare's time. Shakespeare and his boys made quite a bit of money, so it's very hard to look down on someone who's making more money than you are. And so he kind of changed the status of actors. To our knowledge, you need to know this on the quiz, it's a true or false. To our knowledge, Shakespeare never left England. He might have in his teens, in his early 20s, we don't know what he did. What about his autobiography? He never wrote one. Okay, and no one really thought it was important enough to write a biography about him either. With all those plays, he was, when he got done, he figured he was like a script writer in Hollywood. He had no idea that 500 years from now we would be reading his plays. In fact, I think he'd be very disappointed that we'd be reading his plays because they're meant to be performed. Why do we read them? Well, because we have to read them a little bit before we can understand them these days. But they were meant to be performed. They're scripts, okay? And he would like you to see we can watch the movie of it, but that's what he thought. And didn't think some people would be reading them. There's a couple other things in the quiz I do want you to know. He was a better writer than an actor. He couldn't get big parts even in his own plays, and he knew that. So he became a writer. He never traveled outside of England that we know of. The copies of the plays, a lot of people don't understand this, were destroyed. Back then they had no copyright law, and if an actor left his script laying on the bar, somebody could pick it up and perform it, and there's nothing they could do about it. Isn't that stealing? Well, it is now, but back then they didn't have any rules about copyright. So what they did, they would memorize a part, and then they would burn it. Okay, so if you're playing Mercutio or you're playing Romeo, you memorize your parts, and then you burned it. Then how can we still have his plays? Because these actors reproduced these plays and put them down on paper. They would say, okay, what was your part, and then what was your part, and then they reconstructed it. Shakespeare didn't do all that? No, we don't have any scripts in his hand. Like I said, once he got done, he figured that was it. I mean, he didn't think people would be that interested. And he did write good plays, and he was proud of them, I'm sure. And people recognized they were good plays, but the fact that these actors and his friends actually put them on paper, that's why we have them today. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. I said we don't really know much about him in his teens and his 20s. He never wrote a biography or autobiography. He never traveled that we know of, although he writes about Italy and other countries and things like that. So he might have been a sailor or a soldier. We just don't know. I think that's predominantly. I think that's it. Yeah, I think you'll be okay from the. So if you missed class or you missed whatever, you can watch this and get the information you need for the quiz. Okay? So hopefully this helped, and hopefully it'll make you enjoy a Shakespearean play a little bit more. Bye, kids. Yeah, bye.